So if you have your seats, is this mic working? It's on. Testing, is this?
Start with me.
Okay. Chris? Let me get this thing. I'd like to call to order the Board of Directors. We have our seats.
Oh, your mic might not be.
It's on. Testing, is this mic working? Testing, 1, 2.
1, 2, 1. This is working.
Okay.
Check, check.
Okay, I'd like to call the meeting to order. It's 6:32 now. Board of Directors meeting Thursday, May 15th. It's a special meeting to a different, because of a different location. First agenda item is a call to order and a roll call.
Okay, call the roll. Director Andrews.
Present.
Director Bro.
Present for Brisbane and GVMID.
Director Chambers.
Present.
Director Cohen. Director Duncan.
Present.
Director Hamilton.
Present.
Director Hardy. Director Jordan. Director Kiesel. Director Lincoln. Director Manalo. Director, what's it? Okay. Director Mellinger. Director Mickelson. Director Montano. Director Jordan is arrived. Director Nash. Director Piccolotti. Director Pierce.
Here.
Thanks. Director Ragsdale. Director Ragsdale maybe can't hear us. She's calling in remotely. I'm going to take it that she's here because I see her face.
I cannot hear you guys. I
Okay.
can see you, but you're on mute.
Okay, we'll work on that. Okay, sorry, Director Ragsdale is here. Director Schneider,
Ann Schneider, present.
Director Showalter, Director Stevenson, Director Stone, Director Vella,
Here.
Director Weed, Director Ziegterman. We do have quorum.
Okay, thank you. Next item is the Pledge of Allegiance, so if we could have it all stand. Those flags over there. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, thank you. Welcome to our May BAWSCA Board meeting, and thank you for attending at this new location. Of our 5 BPC and board meetings this year, this is our 4th different location. Between room availability problems, a bulky elevator, which means Foster City location does not meet ADA requirements, this year has been a challenge. Staff has done a great job finding these locations while maintaining our live streaming capabilities. Also for this meeting, we have one director who is in New York City, who's participating remotely, and because of that, all votes will be by roll call. I will also say that in this meeting, we really don't have an update for closed session, so we're going to be canceling the closed sessions. Of course, the big news is that Tuesday afternoon, SFPUC approved the proposed revised water supply agreement, which should resolve our minimum purchase requirement problem. Hopefully, our agencies can now expeditiously approve this WSA and Tier 2 allocations, which we've been working on so hard to develop. At 183 pages, this is by far our biggest packet of the year. Much of the bulk are the professional services contracts we need to have in place by 1 July for both BAWSCA operations and for our subscription-based conservation programs. The contracts and past dollar values will give you an idea of the important services we provide our supported agencies. Our first action item of tonight is also critical for next year, that being the final improvement of our 2025-26 budget, our work plan and budget, including a revised assessment to fund that work plan. The board and BPC have been discussing these items for the past few meetings, so I hope there are no major surprises. Let's wear our BAWSCA hats and do what's best for the region. We need to provide all our agencies a reliable supply of high-quality water at a fair and affordable price. Lastly, tonight, Dr. Ashuri will be conducting a Strategy 2050 planning session. Please wear your regional hat on this discussion as well. Strategy 2050 will be a policy document, and the board should provide policy, so I encourage you to participate in tonight's discussion. Water is a critical commodity for life and the environment, but supplies are being impacted by drought and climate change. We owe our agencies a long-term strategy which needs to be developed by Strategy 2050. Now on with the show. Director Hardy is not here yet.
Oh, there she is.
This,
She is.
It was exciting to find you. I got more of a view of the campus than I was planning on.
okay.
Could I pause for 1 second? Lourdes, did we have Director Ragsdale available to hear?
She said yes.
She can hear, okay, thanks.
Okay.
So it's time.
Time for a BPC report.
Oh,
Good. What's your? You can catch your breath first.
all right. And I brought Director Monotek with me. He's off to the restroom, but we thought we could get here faster if we took the HOV lane. Didn't work out.
Surprise.
Thank you. Now I don't have my minutes with me, but I will tell you that the board policy met and we had quite a long, exciting discussion over the work plan and over the salaries, and we have made some recommendations I think are very good. And I wanted to say, I really appreciate those of you who serve on the policy board and put that extra time in there, because it is a lot of extra time. So thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any comments on that?
Have a public comment request for this item for
For
BBC.
this item?
That's what it says. You
Okay.
can get us a card, yeah, but we have this one first.
Okay, Mary Butterwick, do you want to make a comment on BPC report? Is there
Is there, yeah.
all
over
the
there.
way up there?
That's the only one on this so far, so
Okay.
that seems to-
Good evening. My name is Mary Butterwick. As a longtime resident of San Francisco and SFPUC ratepayer, I have a personal connection to the Tuolumne River, the source of my drinking water. I wanted to take this opportunity to commend the BAWSCA Policy Committee for the thoughtful questions and concerns reflected in the April 9th meeting minutes. Specifically, recognition that water growth demand no longer increases at the same rate as population growth. Water demand projections need to be realistic and to factor in this changed behavior. The need to identify the BAWSCA region's risk tolerance in regards to the delivery of normal year supply during drought periods. Question the cost of building infrastructure for improbable events, such as the 8.5-year design drought currently used by the SFPUC to manage flows in the Tuolumne River. The need for the work plan to reflect an emphasis on affordability, considered the biggest challenge for BAWSCA. I am pleased to see that affordability is specifically included in the BAWSCA proposed work plan. As a retired person on a fixed income, substantial increases in water rates, especially for the development of unneeded alternative water supplies to meet a perceived water supply gap, is a real concern. SFPUC's 10-year capital plan does not include the alternative water supply plan. Developing the plan is estimated to add 17 to 25 billion to the budget. This is no chump change. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Now, Mr. Warner, and again, 2 minutes.
Sorry, just very quick. I just was lucky enough to be at the BPC meeting last month and just want to say thank you to Director Hardy and CEO Smegal. It was such a collaborative meeting. There was even one point where I think every single board member there made comments, and it was just fascinating to learn how people were thinking about things. So I just really want to say that was an impressive meeting. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any other comment from the public or from board members? Seeing none. Next item is consent calendar. Board members desire to pull any items from the consent calendar.
Yeah,
But-
and Director Mellinger, I've been
Okay.
catching, yeah.
Okay. Okay, any comments on consent calendar? Any comments from the public on the consent calendar? Or from the remote public in New York?
There is,
Okay.
I'm not sure this is a mistake or not. Virginia Tincher said she wanted to speak on that item, but
Okay, Virginia Tenture Van Quan, did you want to speak on,
on the consent agenda?
what did you want to speak on,
General-
5 or 4?
General public comment?
Item 4, SFPUC report.
That's
No.
item 5.
That's item 5.
Yeah, but we'll hold you for then. Thank you.
Okay, do I have a motion on the consent calendar?
Move to approve the items on consent.
Okay, Director Hamilton moves approval. Is there a second?
Second.
Barbara Pierce, Director Pierce. If there's no further comments, a roll call. Roll call for the consent calendar.
Okay. We do have a remote participant, so we have to do a roll call. Okay. Director Andrews.
Aye.
Director Bro.
Yes for Brisbane and GVMID.
Director Chambers.
Aye.
Director Duncan.
Yes.
Director Hamilton.
Yes.
Director Hardy.
Yes.
Director Jordan. Director Kiesel. And Director Mellinger.
Aye.
Director Mickelson. Director Montano. Director Nash.
Yes.
Director Pierce.
Yes.
Director Ragsdale.
Yes.
Director Schneider.
Yes.
Director Showalter. Director Stevenson.
Yes.
Director Vella.
Yes.
Director Weed.
Aye.
Director Zichterman. Did anybody else sneak in while I didn't miss any directors. Okay. Motion passes.
Yeah. Through the chair, whenever someone wants to make a motion or speak, could you please put the name tag in the vertical position facing this way because of the lighting? It's very, very hard to see you guys. And we don't want to miss anybody, so thank you.
Okay. Next item is the SFPUC report. I'd like to have the report, then we'll ask for board comments and then public comments.
Great. I can use the
We can
buttons.
use that.
Good. Good evening, President Chambers and fellow directors. Thank you for the opportunity to be here this evening. I will make a few quick comments. Yes, we did have the ability on Tuesday at our commission meeting to adopt the minimum purchase amendment along with some of the other items that were part of Attachment H, the water shortage contingency plan or water shortage allocation plan, and some other minor adjustments. So we're very happy that that went forward. We do know that there's further amendments that will eventually be coming on the water supply agreement. So we look forward to continued conversations, but we're very happy that this moved forward and we were able to do that on our Tuesday meeting. I will also mention that the wholesale rates were adopted, that 2.3% So that very small amount on the wholesale rates, so that was adopted at our commission meeting as well. So I will give us a water supply update, and at the end, I'm going to speak a little bit on federal and state actions. Steve Ritchie's also here tonight to answer questions or add if needed. So currently, May 5th, May 12th, reservoir storage, we're looking really full at this point in time. We're starting to see snow melt. Actually, this past weekend, we were really starting to do our releases that are to match the natural hydrology. So we really ramp up under the Upper Tuolumne River Ecosystem Project program, UTREP as we call it. We match our releases from the reservoir as we know snowmelt's coming in to mimic that high flow rate. And depending with the Yosemite National Park, their scientists, we really basically shape that to mimic what we would see if the dam was not there with what's available as incoming inflows. So that's occurring right now. They've already hit a high peak and they're tapering off. So we're starting to see snowmelt occur. Reservoirs are full and we're looking very good. Across the state, actually, if you'll take note of the top two, if you can see them, or if you have your slide deck in front of you, both Shasta and Oroville are very, very high. Oroville is almost to the top capacity. Those are flood control reservoirs, so it's very important to note that they are typically not that high. They normally have space to manage any incoming flows for flood protection. We, of course, do not have that obligation. We manage for water supply. But across the state, everyone is looking higher than their historical average at this point in time of the year. Drought monitor, which is more an agricultural monitor, definitely continues to show dry conditions down in the southern portion of the state, but for us, looking pretty good. Precipitation, you'll see we have a median line here, the dark line. We have been hugging it this year. We sort of hugged just below last year. So again, for us, this is a median year, which is not really too bad for us. It actually turns out quite well in terms of our storage levels. Precipitation upcountry, we have had 28.74 inches against an average for the whole water year. So through September, typically, October to September, we typically see 30.92. So we're in the 90%, 92, 97. And the same thing, Bay Area is really quite high, normally 23.35 is the median. We're at 22.38. So we're really seeing ourselves hitting the median in terms of precipitation, both upcountry and locally. Snowpack is similar to that precipitation, really sort of hugging the median line. And as you see, we're seeing a tapering off. The snowpack is melting at this point. Water available to the city, that orange line there is the top hat that is part of the Raker Act that provides Modesto and Turlock irrigation districts assurance that they get first right of their water rights on the river. We receive water above that. Basically, the blue flows are those of the actual inflows into the reservoir, and the green is the accumulation of what we're accumulating in storage. Weather forecast, we're seeing a little bit of rain earlier this week and a little bit up country, and nothing next week. And then lastly, we are seeing good numbers, at least in terms of our deliveries. So we're at 213.3 million gallons per day. We do typically see this climb up in the past April 15th and into summer when we're seeing outdoor irrigation. I think people have seen some normal rainfall, et cetera, so now they're out doing their irrigation, and that summer increase. So above what we've seen, above our 5-year average, and certainly above what we've seen in the last couple of years. So I think that's it on that. So the last couple of items I wanted to just briefly comment on, we've had asked about federal actions, new administration and impacts. What we're looking at when we're looking at executive orders and potential changes at the federal level, the highest items that we're most concerned about, which I think many are, is the status, the tax status of municipal bonds. There was discussion originally about those going to a taxable status instead of the non-taxed status. That obviously would cause increased costs on the debt side. I think we've not heard as much about that recently, but that was mentioned early on. Decreased funding for SRF loans, state revolving fund loans, so that's federal money coming to the state and available to agencies such as ours and yours for low interest loans, so we're watching that. The other piece, Yosemite National Park, we certainly have seen some transition in leadership. The superintendent, deputy superintendent took retirement. We do thankfully have the chief of staff, one of the main contacts there remains, Joe Meyer. So he's very familiar with our operations, and we've been in discussions to see impacts to the park and how we basically continue to support them and maintain the water quality requirements of the Raker Act. So ongoing conversation, but at least we've got a very stable partner there that's familiar with operations and we're in contact with. On the state side for us, we're continuing to watch legislation. We know there's a couple of low-income low-income assistance, rate assistance that are in they're moving forward through their initial houses. So we're actually moving to hopefully support those couple of bills. They don't have direct impacts to us, but we're always cognizant that affordability and ratepayer programs to support low income is a very critical part of not only ours, but of other agencies. So those are moving forward. And we're continuing to just watch legislation, but nothing quite on the top of the list that we're really alerting anyone to at this point. So I think that's my report, and happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Do you need any letters of support for the making sure the low-income affordable programs are funded?
San Francisco doesn't need them, but you might want to look. We can get you those numbers. I think it's, if I remember, we've got an AB 352 and a 350. I can't remember if they're SB and AB, but they're both in that 352, 350. And they are currently in their originating houses being heard. So those, I would say much more on your side as a city or agency. You might want to look and see if it's something that you would support. Again, for us, one of them is for agencies with 3,000 or less connections, so that actually is not an impact to San Francisco. We have a much larger number of connections, but we feel it's a very important, basically that there is support so that various agencies of various sizes have that. So I would take a look, and we can certainly send an email through Tom and the staff.
Okay.
Steve?
Yeah, it's AB 532 and SB 350.
That was
Thank
close.
you.
Thanks, Steve. I didn't bring those numbers up. Perfect.
Dr. Stone?
Great, thank you, Chair. One issue I'd like to raise was regarding the SFPUC's response to questions that I submitted about the design drought and its associated risk. In my role as member of the Palo Alto City Council, not as a BAWSCA rep, I sent a letter to the general manager asking for basic information to help our community better understand the risk of the design drought scenario, how that risk informs planning for water supply and rates. And unfortunately, I received a pretty disappointing and honestly just kind of dismissive response to those questions. And the manager stated that to my request for information that the SFPUC has no calculations on the return period of the design drought, and added that a return period has no relevance to the need to plan for a drought worse than any we have experienced. And that was surprising, if not concerning. I think one of the foundational responsibilities for any utility is to be able to assess and understand risk as part of prudent planning, and especially when those assessments directly impact ratepayer costs and the scale of investment in alternative water supplies. And moreover, that letter stated that SFPUC will not address water supply planning through response to individual wholesale customers, elected or appointed officials, which I think just raises a broader issue of transparency and accountability to the communities that we serve. So just a couple questions. I'm curious if the SFPUC really believes that understanding the return period or probability of the design drought is irrelevant to responsible planning.
I think and Steve, I don't know if you want to add into this, but the request was whether we had a return period, which has not been studied, and there is not a return period. Mostly, again, the design drought is a study and a planning document that enables us to look at something that's worse than we have actually experienced. So operationally, we operate on a daily basis in terms of what is existing as snowpack, what we see as demands, temperatures, a multitude of factors. So that is a planning document. It is a calculation of 2 of our worst drought periods combined, but the ask was for the return period, which is not an actual, it's not an item that has been studied, and again, for the purpose of having a planning document. The return period, when you're looking for what may be today, the worst, it might be the start of the worst drought that you're seeing. The design drought is an effective tool for looking at that and how the system operates.
I guess I'm just confused, just without that data, how we can have confidence that the selected design drought is neither over or underestimating the actual risk.
Steve, do you want to add anything here? Because you certainly have been party to selection of this.
Thanks. Yes, Steve Ritchie, Assistant General Manager for Water at the PUC. One of the things that I think we understand is that, I'll start back with the drought of 86 through 92. That was an unheard of sequence then. That was not on anybody's radar screen as some possible event. But that at least gives us data that that can happen. When people have talked about, excuse me, how we would operate then and what we have to plan for, I think we very seriously considered that at the end of that or any drought, what do you plan for in the following year? And it's foolhardy to say, oh, the return period says it'll be okay next year, so we don't have to worry about it. That's not the approach we have taken, basically. We have to plan for it's going to be bad, and so that was the selection we made. When you try to calculate a return period or something, you're usually relying on some body of evidence. And I'd actually probably put it into the Corps of Engineers lingo. They used to talk about flood control. They don't call it flood control anymore. They call it flood risk management, because that's what they're thinking about, risk management. And the risks that they're looking at are discrete events that have damage but are recoverable from. What we're looking at in terms of a discrete event is a worse drought, which could end up with an extreme shortage of water supply to the point that it affects the whole Bay Area. We believe that's the most prudent way to plan for it because we couldn't figure out the 87 through 92 drought, 86 through 92. We know that there will be a worse drought in the future. How do we do that? Calculating a return period does not seem to provide any real insight. In fact, it's downright misleading to actually calculate a return period and have some confidence that that means something. And then that is the nature of how we have to plan for water.
I appreciate the answer. I guess I don't see why that would not be helpful information, but I appreciate the response. I wonder, since it doesn't appear that SFPUC would answer any of our individual questions or through our own individual agencies, how fellow directors, if my fellow directors would be interested in perhaps having a letter through Mr. Smegal to formally ask the SFPUC to provide risk assessment behind the design drought scenario, as well as an analysis of alternative scenarios. I think that would just be able to, I know that would help me better understand potential cost impacts and help ensure that affordability, which I know is something that we've been talking more and more about over the last several meetings, and part of our goals, I think that would all be beneficial for all of us. So kind of put that out there and see if fellow directors think that's a good idea. Thank you.
Okay, Director Stein. Now turn that around so you can see your.
Thank you. First, we get the Chronicle, I get the electronic San Jose Mercury News, and we get the Daily Journal. And just want to congratulate on the historic designation of the Water Temple, which has been in the news the last 2 weeks, and the new trail system. And so congratulations, lovely to see that. And we up in North County would love to be working on more of those trail connections up, around San Andreas Park on that. So if we can talk offline on that, but just wanted to say hats up. I know we can't talk on that because it's not agendized, but I would support placing it on the policy committee for discussion.
And thank you, we enjoyed it too.
Okay, any other comments from the board? I have one speaker card from the public, Virginia Tencher Van Quan, and you can speak for 2 minutes.
Oh, would you like, they're behind you, he's looking as if he's wondering if he has. Okay, well, you can speak, you can go up there and speak after. Okay, okay.
Hi, I'm Virginia Tencher Van Kuren. I'm a resident of Palo Alto and a user of Tuolumne River water and a member of Tuolumne River Trust. I just want to reiterate that as you consider the adoption of your upcoming annual work plan, we respectfully urge you to include 2 study sessions in the coming months. A session focused on the Tuolumne River Voluntary Agreement and concerns regarding its potential effectiveness. A session evaluating the prudence of the SFPUC's design drought assumptions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
We have one other speaker.
One other speaker, and I don't know your name, but you can tell us up there. And this is on the SFPUC report.
Good evening. My name is Denise Louie. I'm a resident and PUC San Francisco resident and PUC ratepayer, and I want to congratulate Director Stone on his questions, and I urge the BAWSCA directors to pursue that line of questioning. And when it comes to affordability, it's not just about low-income ratepayers. I'm not low income, but I'm really afraid of constantly increasing rates from the PUC. So, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Director Nash.
Thank you. Did I understand from Director Schneider that the understanding the return period of design drought will be brought to the policy committee? Because I would be in favor. Or
It's
no?
up to her to bring it up, and it's not on the agenda. Is it going to be added? I'm not
Okay.
sure. They'll have to.
Well, I would support Director Stone's request.
Okay. Okay. Any other comments from the board or public on this item? Okay. Next item is public comments on general topics. Mary Butterwick. Again, this is 2 minutes per item. Followed by Mr. Warner.
Mary Butterworth?
This is item,
Yes, item 6.
Item 6, this is public comments on items not on the agenda.
Everybody in item 6.
My name is Mary Butterwick. I'm a resident of San Francisco. Since 2019, when I learned that San Francisco, BAWSCA, and others had joined a lawsuit against the State Water Board's Bay Delta Plan update, I and other members of the public have attended and testified at numerous SFPUC meetings to urge the Commission to revisit its extremely conservative 8.5-year design drought and inflated water demand projections. Thus far, the Commission has been unresponsive to our concerns. While I originally got involved from a concern with the overall health of the aquatic ecosystem, I subsequently realized that SFPUC is facing a real fiscal crisis due to long-deferred maintenance, unrealistic water demand projections, increased costs, and decreased revenues. So implementing the 8.5-year design drought harms both the environment and ratepayers. As mentioned earlier, the SFPUC's 10-year capital plan does not include the costs associated with developing alternative water supplies, which would add $17 to $25 billion to the budget. It is my understanding that by reducing the design drought by 1 year and by applying realistic demand projections, one can reduce the amount of alternative water supplies needed by 2/3. I do not believe that ratepayers should have to invest in very expensive water supplies that will not be needed. Hopefully, BAWSCA will be able to carefully scrutinize the SFPUC's alternative water supply plan. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Warner, followed by Julianne Frizzell. So you're after Mr. Warner.
And so my comments on affordability, is that okay in the general public comment?
Sure.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for your service and your close attention to our water utility. Several of you have made comments about affordability and ways to help better manage affordability, and thank you for those. To the consternation of Assistant General Manager Ritchie, I've said a number of times that we have the highest wholesale water rates of any major utility in California. His point is that I'm not taking into account the state water project property tax assessments that constituents of other utilities pay, particularly the runner-up, the San Diego County Water Authority. And he's right. If I had a way to include the assessments into water rates, we in San Diego probably would have about the same price for an acre-foot of water. But that's not good news. It's like comparing the price of a half-gallon of milk between Molly Stone's and Piazza's, two of the most expensive grocery stores. But there's another problem. Paying for your water entirely through a water bill is more regressive than having a portion paid through property taxes. When paying only through a water bill, lower income residents pay a higher proportion of their income towards water than higher income residents. But when partially paid through property taxes, where property tax charges relate to the value of your house, wealthier residents pay more. Some may argue that water utilities try to address this problem in several ways. I have not heard of one that works well. My conclusion is that not only do we have high water rates, but they are also more regressive than those that have property tax assessments. There's a fair risk that our water rates will be going up a lot in the next 10 years. A small example, the 25-26 wholesale rate that was previously forecasted to be flat a couple of years ago, or flat after a couple of years of big increases. Now we're looking at a 2.3% increase. Not big, but the recent change is an indicator that there's a lot of uncertainty in water rates. To me, the best answer is to get an understanding of everything that affects our water rates and find opportunities to mitigate the rate growth. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Now, Julianne Frizzell, followed by Peter Druckmeyer.
So I'm Julianne Frizzell, landscape architect. I was struck last meeting by Tom Zichterman's comments, in which he noted Stanford has constructed 2 million square feet of built space over the past 25 years, and yet water use has remained flat at Stanford. There has been good design, construction, and maintenance at Stanford, thanks largely to Marty Lepore, who worked at Stanford and served on the BAWSCA board. We see improved construction and efficiency in all agency areas. However, I suggest that there is room to improve. I have recently learned about the concept of demand hardening, which was put forth by a BAWSCA member. At least here on the peninsula, we are far from tapping into all of the low-hanging fruit of irrigation, water conservation, and efficiency. In my walks and observations throughout the area, I see much wasted water in the landscape, either due to poorly designed and run irrigation systems or broken systems. Also, even folks who have well-designed and installed systems don't always set up their irrigation controllers correctly. We are careful to take our cars to good mechanics, but we're not so careful when we choose our gardeners. The BAWSCA agencies have done a great job of encouraging water savings in the realm of irrigation design and build, but I suggest that There also needs to be an emphasis on maintenance and the homeowner's responsibility for water use in their gardens. Water use throughout the Bay Area has either decreased or been flat for at least 30 years, and we have room to make even more improvements. There is no reason for BAWSCA to continue to support the SFPUC's inaccurately calculated design drought. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Now, Peter Dreckmeyer, followed by Martin Gothberg.
Good evening, Peter Dreckmeyer, Tuolumne River Trust. On Earth Day, I filed a complaint with the State Water Board over the SFPUC's unreasonable use of water. And it's actually not the use of the water, which BAWSCA has done a really good job at conserving, and San Francisco has done a phenomenal job, but how it's managed. The way it's managed is starving the Tuolumne River in dry years when the salmon need the water most, and then having to dump water when the precipitation returns. We call it hoard and spill. Mr. Ritchie commented that there was a need to plan for a drought worse than any we'd seen before. The deficit, which is the severity of the 87 to 92 drought, is a little bit over 700,000 acre feet. That's water needed out of storage. 76, 77 was a little over 500,000 acre feet. So you're talking about a drought that's 72% more than the most severe drought on record, including tree ring data, including 25,000 simulated model runs. I'd love to have these discussions. You know, I've got lots of great facts to share with you. Recently, the League of Women Voters invited TRT and the SFPUC and BAWSCA to participate in a water symposium. Both the SFPUC and BAWSCA declined. Go figure. Instead, there's this idea of a Tuolumne River voluntary agreement producing more fish with less water. Well, the SFPUC and the irrigation districts completed a spawning gravel augmentation project last fall. It will produce more fry, more baby fish, no doubt about it. But there's no place for them to rear. They need floodplains where they have refuge from the bass that are predators, where there's more food, where they can grow bigger and get out. So all that's going to happen is they're going to produce more bass food. Bass are an invasive non-native species. It's a big part of the problem. So, you know, I will send you my complaint. If you have questions about it, let me know, and maybe BAWSCA would offer San Francisco the opportunity to respond to it. Thank you.
Okay, next I am Martin Gothberg. I have 2 speaker cards for you, but you're going to have 2 minutes to cover both. Water use plan management and legal fees. And that's going to be followed.
I can do them in order. The one is, I think, for 8.
You have 2 minutes.
I'm sorry?
For item 6, for items not on the agenda, you have 2 minutes.
So 2 minutes for this, correct?
For these 2.
For items not on the agenda.
For items not on the agenda.
Well, so one is public comment, and the other one is related to the plan.
General comment. Okay, the plan is different item. Okay.
So I can do 2 minutes later with
Yeah,
this?
yeah.
Okay, because I'm doing this for a friend who cannot attend. I'm Martin Gothberg, and I'm up here for Stephen Rosenblum.
Okay, this is different agenda item. Item 7A, I believe.
Are we okay?
Yeah.
Can I go? I want
Go on
to
legal fees.
respect your time.
Go on legal fees.
The legal fees, yes.
For 2 minutes, and followed by Denise Louie, who's going to be after you.
Thank you. Thank you very much for allowing me just to be up here. I appreciate it. This is for Stephen Rosenblum, who could not attend, and he had sent a letter into BAWSCA requesting fees, and he learned from that, of course, all these fees, the legal fees, over $3 million over the last several years that go toward fighting the Bay Delta Water Quality Control Plan, the FERC relicensing, et cetera. So it's $3 million, and he questions really whether our constituents would approve of these expenditures, especially given that they're the ones who do pay the bill ultimately through rates. So residents on the peninsula and in South Bay area care about San Francisco Bay. We all do, including the Tuolumne. Those of us who follow BAWSCA, as he has for 8 years, are extremely disappointed in policies and actions that subvert efforts to restore salmon runs, and some of these legal fees and fighting this is seen that way. So, you know, Measure AA, long ago, 16, I was around. Again, past 70%, people really do want to tax themselves to go do the restoration needed along the watershed and in the San Francisco Bay. So that's in the letter that you should have, along with the detail. And that's it for me on this item. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Louie?
Denise Louie speaking. As a member of the Center for Biological Diversity, a national organization, a few years ago I addressed BAWSCA about the moral and ethical responsibility to steward our waterways for the sake of biodiversity and wildlife, but I believe my comments are worth renewing. So decades ago we heard that delta smelt were declining in the Bay Delta. Now there are hardly any to count. Now 7 fish species are imperiled, including the delta smelt, which is an ecosystem health indicator species, salmon, a keystone species, and sturgeon, an archaic species. And the Bay Delta ecosystem and ecosystems along headwaters are at risk of collapse. As a resident of San Francisco and PUC ratepayer, I am disappointed that the PUC continues to block implementation of the Bay Delta Plan with its lawsuits and ineffective voluntary agreements. I urge BAWSCA to join environmentalists in standing up for biodiversity and increased freshwater flows that fish need to survive. California is recognized as one of only 36 internationally recognized biodiversity hotspots. That means we are blessed with an abundance of species which we have brought to the brink of extinction. No other state has greater biodiversity than California, and let's be proud of that.
Okay, thank you. I believe, is there any more public comment on general items not on the agenda? Okay, seeing none, next is our action calendar. 7A is proposed fiscal year 2025-26 work plan, results to be achieved, and operating budget. Mr. Smegal will be presenting this, which will be followed by comments from the board, public comments, and then a motion eventually.
Thank you, Chair Chambers. So I just have a few slides in summary today. You've seen a couple of different presentations, first at our last BAWSCA meeting and at the last 2 BPC meetings on the work plan and the budget as the staff is presenting them. So I'm going to start by highlighting what's in the work plan. A few bullets here, and if you can follow along in your packet. If you can't see the screen, I realize it's kind of an odd-shaped room. The plan continues BAWSCA's role in managing the water supply agreement with San Francisco to protect the member agency's financial and water supply interests. We administer BAWSCA's bonds. We provide oversight of SFPUC's capital programs, the WISA 10-year CIP and asset management. We engage in SFPUC's alternative water supply plan implementation and planning. We participate in the Bay Delta and FERC proceedings to protect our regional water supplies. 2 big projects this year that you know well, the BAWSCA Strategy 2050, which is a special project we're doing this year and next, and the continued completion of the development of the updated regional water demand and conservation projections, and that is expected to be done by the end of the calendar year here in 2025. We do also plan to work to implement the Tier 2 drought plan and associated water supply amendment. That amendment was just adopted by the SFPUC. And finally, implementing the core and subscription conservation programs that BAWSCA performs. There are a couple of minor changes from what was presented at the last board meeting. The first is that the development of the updated regional water demand projections, there's been a shift in time of some of the cost. So about $40,000 that was to be spent in the 24-25 fiscal year is not going to be spent and is going to be spent in the next fiscal year. So we've added $40,000 to the budget related to that. We will have additional, all other things being equal, we will have an additional reserve balance of $40,000 carrying over from this this fiscal year. So it nets out to zero. There is another two items related to legal and consulting costs, and that is related to the 2028 decisions that have to be undertaken by the SFPUC. This relates to our water supply assurance and to San Jose, Santa Clara. We initially proposed a budget we feel now is too small for that item. And finally, the water supply amendment, which was just passed, implementing that and getting it ratified by all of your agencies will likely take additional legal work in the summer and fall, which will be in the next fiscal year. And then finally, not monetary, but in the work plan itself, which was in your board packet, we noted several work plan elements that do reflect affordability considerations. In response to Director Stone's comments at the last board meeting, we went through the work plan and identified areas where actually affordability is an aspect of the consideration of that work plan item. So those are highlighted in red, I believe, in your packet, board packet, so you can see where that was. I think it's 3 or 4 places where that is a big consideration, and of course, it's definitely a consideration in the Strategy 2050 project, and we'll get into that a little bit later in our session. The operating budget that we're proposing this year is lower than the operating budget for the prior fiscal year, 24-25, just slightly lower, about $67,000 lower. Again, it's about $5.5 million, fully funds the annual OPEB expense, and it includes a budget allowance for staff increases of 5%, which reflect COLA and merit-based increases. And it results in a total water customer cost of $2.97 per person per year, and that's 3 cents less than the cost of the BAWSCA activities in the last fiscal year. You can see on the pie chart how this is divided. That's fairly typical on how that's divided. Most of our work is on reliable supply. Fair price and agency operations are the other big components of that. So our primary considerations for funding the budget, our primary source of funding are the assessments that are charged to member agencies. We usually look at 4 principles. We want a budget that is sufficient in resources to achieve the desired work plan results. We want to spend only what is necessary to achieve those results, and apply incremental and prudent increases in assessments as necessary, maintaining a prudent general reserve. That general reserve balance we think of as between 20 and 35% or so. And so we'll get to that in the next slide, but we're estimating our budget would result in a general reserve of about 22% at the end of the next fiscal year. So that's within the window of the general reserve balances. We're currently estimating spending 90 to 95% of the current fiscal year approved budget, but we're not assuming that. And so in our calculations for the 25-26, we're not assuming that we're going to carry over any additional general reserve. That'll be important when we discuss the pension issue. Finally, last year we had a 9% increase, so 24-25 was a 9% increase, rather large, and it resulted in a general reserve balance of right now 24%. We are proposing, I don't want to, you've seen this before, and you've seen this in the packet, but I'm going to jump 2 slides and say that our proposal here is to increase the assessment by 2.3%. That is coincidental. What San Francisco has increased their rates by, not coincidental. I mean, that's where it came from. Trying to be consistent with that and not exceed them. That again would result in a total budget of a total budget reserve of 22%, and result in assessments that pay for 97% of our activities, the other 3% coming out of reserves. And then let me just jump back. The other consideration that the BPC talked about, and that we talked about late last year, I think at the December board meeting, was a consideration of paying off the unfunded accrued liability for BAWSCA's pension obligation faster than the CalPERS default of a 20-year schedule. That projected unfunded liability is $1.264 million at the moment, and it would be estimated to be paid off in 20 years in 2045. We have the option to accelerate payments using additional discretionary payments, ADPs. You can do that at any time and for any length of time for any amount. They can reduce the UAL and result in long-term savings, because any time that you pay earlier, you're avoiding the interest cost of paying later. So the BPC discussed this item and made a recommendation that you'll see here, that we consider doing that at the end of the calendar year. So in December, we receive our final updated amount that is going to reserves based upon what wasn't spent in the 24-25 fiscal year. And so for the BPC in December and for the board in January, we'll have a better idea of what the financial situation is and whether it is appropriate at that time to make an ADP toward the pension obligation. So that is the proposal that you see in front of you. We're calling that option 2A. There was also presented to the BPC option 2B, which would have included in the initial budget a $66,000 investment, so to speak, in reducing that pension obligation. So the recommendation you see here, I'm now realizing there's a typo in this slide. So the committee recommended that the board adopt the proposed fiscal year work plan and results to be achieved, the proposed operating budget, and the funding plan option 2A. So that's the end of that item, Chair Chambers.
Okay, any comments from the board, Ms. Schneider, Director Schneider?
The Chronicle ran a very big set of articles about the new, fairly new meters that they've got up in San Francisco and how they were having mistakes. And I think, long story short, it turned out that the meters themselves were failing well before time, and that caused some really huge water bills or people not being charged for years. I'm bringing this up now because when I read the contracts, and there's that one contract on water saving, water leaks, I don't know if there's enough wiggle room in there to see if any of us have installed similar devices that could be causing huge bills or changes in their bills, like a year of no bills and then suddenly a year's worth of bill. And if it doesn't fit, I just tried to figure out if it would fit in those two contracts. But it was a great article. If you haven't seen it in the Chronicle, it looked at a couple of different ratepayers where they were suddenly given bills like $6,000. It was phenomenal bills that no regular person could pay out of pocket on that. So I'm just curious if we've got enough wiggle room in those two items to help and to make sure that our customers are not going to experience the same thing. Thank you.
Thanks, Director Schneider. I am aware of those issues, and I know we have some San Francisco folks here could maybe answer that. I think those meters and the metering issues are unrelated to meters that others have, and certainly not related to the wholesale meters that each of you have, pay San Francisco on that basis. We do, Tom Francis, we do have conservation program subscription and core conservation programs that relate to some of those items, and I don't know if that's worth addressing.
Yeah, oops, that's loud there. Director Snyder, I'm happy to report that we did meet with each of our member agencies, including yours, to inform them about what's happening in SFPUC this fiscal year. And we've had the SFPUC discuss the specifics of it, and our agencies don't share the same issue, which is good, but we do have contracts, as you've identified, that includes monies, both what we call core, that all of us as member agencies can participate in, and subscription programs in case your specific agency has an issue with meters. So we have programs that are available in the future, depending on what might happen with your customer meters, that they can access. So it's a robust program we have.
Is that the eSource contract?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, I read through that, and I thought it fit in there, but I just wanted to make sure.
Okay, Director Mellinger.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. So last year we discussed the idea of trying to pay down our CalPERS liability in 10 years rather than in 20. The staff report says that we're looking at spending about $66,000 a year on that. It's not currently budgeted. I just wanted to confirm that my understanding is that since this year is under budget, we are expecting to true up next year's budget at some point, and then at that point we might make a contribution to CalPERS in the amount of about $66,000. Is that an accurate assessment?
So I don't necessarily want to speak for the BPC and for your decision
might
making as
make
a
that
board.
decision.
The hope is that at the time that we make the final determination of how that year went, how the fiscal year went, we could contribute that much or more, depending upon how much went into the reserve during as a result of this fiscal year.
Fantastic. Thank you.
Okay, Director Stone.
Okay, thank you, Chair. And I first appreciate, Mr. Smegal, that the plan includes some new elements and focus on affordability. I appreciate your responsiveness and modifying for it. That said, I do feel the additions do feel a bit modest, especially just given that affordability is increasingly becoming a major concern within our communities and on this board. I was glad to read that during the policy meeting, both my neighbor, Director Zichterman, and Director Vela raised important issues regarding demand projections and price. So I think we're all feeling this. I'm a big believer that budgets reflect values, and I am concerned that only 14.5% of our proposed operating budget is dedicated towards water at a fair price. I think it does deserve greater attention, although, again, really appreciate that staff is working to highlight these issues better in this revised plan. And I mean, with that being said, this will guide, I know, our BAWSCA team through 2026, but if affordability is a rising issue, I think it might be too late until 2026, 2027 to really take a more substantial action on affordability. So, kind of just a couple questions related to this. So while this plan is including some references to affordability, again, I think if we believe it's a top priority, are we able to rebalance some of this work plan to just give that a greater focus? I'm not saying a dramatic overhaul. I think some tweaking here or there. For example, kind of a couple of questions like that I think we might be able to include what long-term rate impacts would look like if we moved forward with building alternative water supplies to be able to meet projected demands. I'd be curious to kind of see a focus on that. What happens to rates if those supplies are built, but the projected demand just doesn't materialize? Conversely, how would rates be affected if current trends continue and demand keeps declining? And then finally, and importantly, what steps can we take now to be able to mitigate those potential rate increases? I know that's a lot. I don't want, quite get our ability at this point to be able to modify this plan and our own deadline, but curious just your thoughts on that.
Thank you for the comments. I think that what you'll find even later tonight when we start to discuss the Strategy 2050 project is that is a core element. That sensitivity analysis of planning for different scenarios, whether those scenarios be low water availability, low growth, high growth, et cetera, that those are a big component of that program, and affordability is very much front and center of the Strategy 2050 project. And that is really a big task for our staff this year, I think you will see some good results coming out of that, and I think you'll be pleased with the attention to affordability in that planning process. I also think that in the demand study that we're currently undertaking, we will again have scenarios that focus on those items that you represent. What if the demand doesn't keep up with housing growth, or what if there is no housing growth? You know, these kinds of questions will absolutely be scenarios that are developed as a result of the demand study that we're performing now. And so I think that you should be pleased with the result of those items, and that is the bulk of what we are working on. I mean, apart from the routine and normal activity that we have relating to the oversight of San Francisco capital programs and financial, et cetera, those special projects make up a lot of our mind space, if you will, during the year. So I'm confident that you're going to get those answers and it'll be at different times. Demand study will be in the middle of the fiscal year. The Strategy 2050 project really will have a result in 2027, but you will hear from us very regularly, perhaps at every meeting, about the status of that project and what we're finding as we go forward with that. I did want to add one more thing in relation to your earlier kind of question, and that is when we see the pie chart of the activities that BAWSCA performs, the fair price refers really to the activity that Christina's group does related to evaluating the operating expenses and the allocations of operating expenses of San Francisco. And the reliable water supply includes the analysis of CIP, the Water Supply Improvement Program, and capital investments. And so when you see that split of costs, those are affordability issues as well. And they're falling into the bucket of reliable water supply because really we think of capital improvements as improving the reliability of the system. And so we want to make sure those are fairly adjudicated, that those costs are reasonable, and that the projects are reasonable. But that does fall a bit under fair price, even though it's not listed there.
No, I appreciate that, and absolutely, they're all related, and glad to see at least we seem to have a more long-term plan to address that affordability. So just one last follow-up question as far as kind of in the more short term. Are there any current work plan activities that we could scale back or maybe defer in order to be able to devote more time and resources towards kind of a affordability analysis or trying to bring those rates down in any way?
Again, I am not seeing that right now, to be honest. I think that the staff is pretty dedicated to these longer range planning projects right now. As you know, we have a very small staff, and if you'll recall, I think a meeting ago or so, we presented a bar chart of our level of involvement in all activities, and it was pretty high. I mean, it was over 100% for every member of the staff, and I think Tom and I managed to hit about 140% of our time doing that calculation. So the staff is unfortunately plenty busy doing all of these things. I think it's going to be rewarding in terms of involvement in the strategy project and the demand project. I'm excited to see where they go.
You know, it's definitely a small but mighty and very competent staff, and I'm glad you were leading them, so appreciate your thoughtful response to my questions.
All right. Thanks.
Okay, before our next board member, Director Ragsdale, are you hearing okay? Everything's...
Yes, I am. Thank you so much for asking.
Okay, there's a note on the screen that says not hearing anything, so I want to make sure she was okay.
That was from the outset. I'm great now. Thank you.
Okay. Director Nash, you had your card up.
She's good.
She's good.
Director Hardy.
Okay, Director Hardy? Now that we woke everybody up.
I'm glad I'm not the
You're
only
loud
one
and
who
clear,
jumped.
Director Ragsdale.
Now that you're all awake, I would like to maybe speak to the BPC and explain. We had quite a discussion, and we looked at this and ran a lot of numbers, and felt that a modest way of chipping away at our unfunded liability was a smart decision in that it didn't cause major problems at this point, but could help us down the road. And being able to take care of that unfunded liability in a 10-year manner instead of a 20 was good fiscal policy. And and having a forward-thinking, long-term plan. And because we are thinking about a fair price. But by doing this now, we also, the reason we came down on 2A without putting a specific amount is because we wanted to be able to true up at the end of each fiscal year and say, what can we do? And if we could do more in a responsible manner, we'd like to do that. And if it had to be a little bit less that one year, we wanted the flexibility. And that was really the discussion that we had, because there is an absolute concern that we do not carry this unfunded liability, which is, you look at the amount and you look at our yearly annual budget, and that's a little frightening. So we like the idea of not allowing that to go on for 20 years. Thank you.
Okay, Director Nash.
Thank you. So I just wanted to check that it says in the report that the unfunded liability, if it's paid off in 10 years, that it will be estimated to result in the present day value approximation of $72,000 for the organization.
66 to 72.
And what is the cost to customer? What is the additional?
The amount that we're looking at is between $66,000 and $72,000 per year, and that is a very small amount. When you look at the entire budget, it's pennies.
Thank you.
Okay, any other questions from board members? Okay, seeing none, I do have some public speakers on item 7A. Martin Gothberg. This is water use plan management. And now he'll be followed by Peter Dreckmeyer.
Thank you again, Martin Gothberg. I'm a retired mountain bike, gravel bike rider from Santa Clara. So I'm here to talk about, first of all, I agree with Peter said earlier, BAWSCA has done a great job at reducing water demand. And the problem isn't how our water is used, but how it's managed. We starved the Tuolumne in dry years when salmon and other species need it the most. One example is 2011. In that year, we had 66% unimpaired flow in the Tuolumne watershed. Next 5 years were dry with as little as 8% unimpaired flow. That's a really small number. So 16, we had 3.5 years worth of water storage. In 2017, with reservoirs above capacity, a deluge of rain led to a whopping 79% unimpaired flow after those 5 dry years. So the cycle of capture, starve, release has happened countless times, with devastating effects to rivers and infrastructure elsewhere in California. It's a result, in my view, of overly conservative water planning and management policy, especially. So restoring California rivers may not be a part of BAWSCA's mission, yet it's highly connected to the planning decisions you face today. Overly conservative forecasting can lead to overinvestment, higher costs, as you recognize, but it also leads to terrible year-over-year management, water management, releases down the river. Fortunately, BAWSCA leadership appears to recognize that a zero-risk approach to water planning will lead to costly outcomes. So to finish up, I'm just going to quote your very own BAWSCA Director, Tom Zichterman, from the meeting minutes. BAWSCA member agencies should be able to collectively provide a non-conservative and representative projection of demand to San Francisco for their wholesale customer water supply planning. He also understands that water growth does not increase at the same rate as population did 30 years ago. Water demand continues to decrease substantially because of the retrofitting that has been done. So with all these savings that we recognize have been done, it doesn't go down the river. It goes behind the dams. Thank you.
Okay. Peter Dreckmeyer, followed by Mary, no, just Peter Dreckmeyer. And this is, I don't know what that is. What's UAL?
The unfunded liability.
Okay, so that's item 7A. Peter, go ahead, I'm sorry.
Oh, thank you. Peter Dreckmeyer, Tuolumne River Trust. So Palo Alto recently invested $500,000 on an alternative water supply plan based on SFPUC information that the city could face 50% rationing. The Utilities Advisory Commission took a lot of time to look into the facts, and they agreed with us that the 50% is basically a manufactured number based on the design drought and inflated demand projections. And so the premise of the plan, you know, they threw it out the door, and they're recommending that council basically just shelve this plan, $500,000 spent. And they recommended that the city ask the SFPUC to answer some questions, so they would have the data to make wise decisions. And I can understand why Director Stone is a little miffed that we got nothing in return for that. It's really, really important to have a good sense of how much water we might need before we start building stuff. It could be a range, but we don't want to happen to us what happened to San Diego. The SFPUC, I'm pretty certain, is already in a financial death spiral, and there are going to be a lot of problems in the coming decades. Let's not make them worse. I want to commend BAWSCA. I was at the demand projections roundtable a couple weeks ago, and it was great. Danielle McPherson did a wonderful job. It involved stakeholders, and that's the way you get the best product. I'm looking forward to the Strategy 2050 workshop on Tuesday. It's in the good hands of Nagin, and I believe Andre, who used to work for BAWSCA, will be helping to guide that. That is how we come up with good products. BAWSCA pays for 2/3 of alternative water supplies. You paid for 2/3 of the studies looking at Los Vaqueros expansion. That project's dead. We got to pay attention to cost. Thank you.
Okay. Virginia Chang clearly. And this is on unfunded UAL.
Yeah, funded liabilities.
7A.
Yes, thank you. My name is Virginia Chang Corrali, and I'm a director on the Menlo Park Fire Protection District Board, and also a commissioner on the San Mateo County Harbor District Board. And I just want to commend y'all for looking at chipping away at your UAL, or unfunded pension liabilities. I think it's the fiscally prudent thing to do. It's what we've done on the fire board. And as you said, chipping away at it a little bit every year is, I think, a smart thing to do. I think since I've been on the board for about 10 years, we've probably paid down about $84 to $88 million, just, paying it down every year. And on the harbor board in 2017, we paid down 50% of our UAL. And we're going to look again at doing some more. So I just want to urge you to just be mindful that it's a smart thing to do, obviously taking other considerations into mind in terms of your service, providing your service. But I think it's a smart thing to do, so thank you for looking at it.
Okay, thank you. Betsy, your card's still up. I think that's from before. That's what I thought. Okay, any other comments from the public? Mary?
I'll speak when the public is done.
Okay. I think Mary Butterwick is actually item 9A, right? So I think public's done on this item. So go ahead, Director Mellinger.
All right, thank you very much. Mr. Smegal, in your estimation, do you believe that SFPUC is facing a fiscal death spiral?
I can only provide anecdotal information, which is not necessarily analytical, but I did have a conversation with their financial manager, or their bond manager just last week. They've indicated that their bond ratings are stable on the water side and reaffirmed by S&P. So there's no evidence of that, if that's what you're looking for. That's kind of the only data point that I have at this point.
And do you happen to know off the top of your head what those bond ratings are?
I actually don't know them off the top of my head, but they do. They're here if you want to ask.
Thank you. Thank you very much. No further questions.
Okay. Move your thing down. Director Mellinger,
Richard?
Okay. If there are no more comments, do I have a motion on item 7A? Okay, Director Snyder.
maybe this is a request for policy. So my water district is going for their 218 in June, and I'm talking to a lot of ratepayers right now. This goes back to what we talked about at the last policy meeting, having the right messaging on that. And going back to Director Stone's, how can we rein in when they're looking at whatever's happening at the national system right now, and how that might impact California and all of the individual cities that are part of their own water districts on that. And I know I got a lot of advice on what to say, but I'm having discussions mainly with Millbrae and San Bruno people on that. And I think maybe a discussion at the policy level just on this affordability issue. I mean, I know I brought up, was it the last meeting or 2 meetings ago, of is there anything in SFPUC's capital improvement program that could be delayed? But then every time we delay, whether we do it at our city levels, it's going to cost more in the future. And I think that goes back to Mr. Dreckmeyer's point of if we're overbuilding, then what do we do? So I think it would be a healthy discussion at the policy level on that. I can't answer it, and as a former instructor, if I don't have enough data that I can explain it to somebody, I can't sleep at night. And I don't mean that funny. I literally, it buzzes through my head, how can I better explain this to ratepayers from a somewhat an academic point of view on that? So my request.
Okay, but I'm still looking for a motion for, okay, Director Pierce.
I'd be happy to make the motion that we adopt the proposed fiscal year 25-26 work plan results to be achieved with the proposed operating budget of $5,547,000, blah, 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 and recommend funding plan option 2A.
Thank you, Director Ziegler.
Second.
Second by Director Zieglerman. Roll call vote.
All right, same roll call from a different spot. Director Andrews.
Aye.
Director Bro.
Yes, for Brisbane and GVMID.
Something's right on here. Director Chambers.
Aye.
Director Duncan.
Yes.
Director Hamilton.
Aye.
Director Hardy.
Yes.
Director Jordan. Director Kiesel.
Aye.
Director Lincoln. Director Mellinger.
Yes.
Director Mickelson.
Yes.
Director Montano. Yes. Director Nash.
Yes.
Director Pierce.
Yes.
Director Ragsdale.
Yes.
Director Schneider.
Yes.
Director Showalter.
Yes.
Director Stevenson.
Yes.
Director Stone.
Yes.
Director Vella.
Yes.
Director Weed.
Aye.
And Director Zichterman.
Yes.
Motion passed.
Okay, thank you. Next item is 7B, approval of professional services contract, fiscal year 2025-26.
Thank you, Chair Chambers. So as I mentioned earlier in our conversation about the staffing, we do have a slim staff for BAWSCA, as you know, with just the 9 of us. Most of our functions are supplemented by the use of consultants. So every year we have, I need your authority to approve consultant contracts. We have 7 contracts that are for our core work and 6 other contracts that are for the subscription conservation programs. There was an extensive write-up and memorandums on memoranda on each of these in your packet. So I won't go through that. They are all repeat vendors, and the changes that are being made this year as opposed to the 24-25 fiscal year are minor, generally such things as inflationary adjustments to their wages that they're charging us, you know, the billing rates and that sort of thing, but all well within reason and vetted through our staff and our attorneys. So I'm happy to take any questions on these items, and the recommendation is on the screen.
Okay, Director Andrews.
Thank you. Just wanted to ask about contract number 2. Are this reasonable percentage increases for legal counsel compared to other organizations or agencies?
Yes, we had small increases in the billing rate for the main legal counsel that we have. I think that we believe that we get fundamentally great service from our legal counsel. I don't want to pump them up too much or they'll raise their rates too much, but you know, they were reasonable adjustments in their rates, I think on the order of 3 or 4%. So not unreasonable in light of other inflation that's out there.
Okay.
And certainly reasonable in the marketplace for legal services.
Great. And then I had a question regarding, I don't know if it's a part of this program. It was a consultant for your outreach. Is that going to be, is that in the same, or that's the next item?
No, they're together. I
Okay,
think.
great. So
The 13 different contracts.
Yep. So the contract 1 through 4, I believe, or 1 through 3, the ones that are related to schools in the outreach there, and wanted to see if we could get a list of schools that they participate in, and then also wanted to know if there's any outreach with some of the conservation groups that are in college campuses, and we also have a Clean and Green Commission at my city, probably others do too, and see if there's some outreach that can happen with that commission as well. So maybe there's some synergy that happens with those programs.
Sure. So just a bit on the structure of this first, and then I may turn to Kyle or Tom for a follow-up. But these are subscription programs that BAWSCA provides to the agencies. And
Okay.
so in your instance, the city of Hayward would participate in some or all of the subscription programs. We wouldn't have a direct relationship with the school.
Okay.
It'd be the contracting agency.
Okay, got it.
One of the reasons that BAWSCA does this is an economy of scale with the vendors.
Okay.
We're able to provide a uniform product that can be used by as many of the BAWSCA agencies as want to use it.
Okay, so I should go to my representative to see how they're, okay. Because I think it's the WaterWise school, so our city subscribes to that. Okay, so I'll work with my agency on that.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to say yes. I don't know if they do or not.
Okay, I'll work with my, Hayward does. Okay, great.
Yeah.
All right, thank you.
Okay, any other questions from board members? Any comments from the public on this item? Seeing none, do I have a motion? Director Zichterman.
As chair, I move that the board approve the 13 contracts subject to legal counsel review for legal, engineering,
Yeah, I'd say.
financial, strategic, water conservation services needing to be in place by July 1, 2025.
Okay, Director Pierce.
I'd like to provide the second and thank staff for the really full report that really detailed all of the work and really explained. If you got half of it, you were getting a lot of information.
183 pages. Okay, any other comments? Need a roll call vote?
All right. Director Andrews.
Aye.
Director Bro.
Yes, times 2.
Director Chambers.
Aye.
Director Duncan.
Yes.
Director Hamilton.
Aye.
Director Hardy.
Yes.
Director Jordan. Director Kiesel. Director Lincoln. Director Mellinger.
Yes.
Director Mickelson. Director Montano. Director Nash.
Yes.
Director Pierce.
Yes.
Director Ragsdale.
We're going to try to whisper.
That
Yes.
works. Okay. Director Schneider.
Yes.
Director Showalter.
Yes.
Director Stevenson.
Yes.
Director Stone.
Yes.
Director Vella.
Yes.
Director Weed.
Aye.
And Director Zichterman.
Yes.
And it passes.
Okay, thank you. Action item 7C, approval and adoption of BAWSCA pay schedules for 25-26.
Point of personal privilege, Mr. Chair. I'd like to request a brief recess.
Well, okay. Without objection, a 5-minute one?
Thank you.
Okay. I got 8 o'clock, so we'll go to 8:05. 5.5? Okay. Director Pierce, is your speaker thing supposed to be up? Okay. Okay. Our next item is approval of adoption and pay schedules for 25-26. CEO Smegal, would you like to tell us about it?
Certainly. So this became an issue as CEO Sankulo was retiring last year, that we hadn't followed the procedure that CalPERS wanted us to follow to publish our pay schedules for the staff. So we're doing that now. This will be a routine item that you'll see in May and again in September on a go-forward basis. So we have to publish our pay schedules, the maximum salaries for each classification. This year we are increasing the pay schedules by the rate of inflation CPI increase of 2.08%. Plus we are adjusting the salary for the senior water resources specialist by the 1.8% that the board approved at its last meeting. And so at the April meeting, the BBC recommended that the board approve and adopt the pay schedules for 25-26. Again, this doesn't affect individual salaries of individual people. This represents the range that we can pay our staff. And
Okay.
you see the recommendation on the board.
Any discussion from the board? Any discussion from the public? I'll accept the motion. Okay, Director Showalter?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, second was? Okay. Okay, roll call.
Director Andrews. Oh, she's not there. Director Bro.
Yes, times two.
Director Chambers.
Aye.
Director Duncan.
Yes.
Director Hamilton.
Yes.
Director Hardy.
Yes.
Director Jordan.
Yes.
Director Kiesel.
Aye.
Director Lincoln.
Yes.
Director Mellinger.
Yes.
Director Mickelson. Yes. Director Montano.
Yes.
Director Nash.
Yes.
Director Pierce.
Yes.
Director Ragsdale.
Yes.
Director Schneider.
Yes.
Director Showalter.
Yes.
Director Stevenson.
Yes.
Director Stone.
Yes.
Director Vella.
Yes.
Director Weed.
Aye.
Director Ziegterman.
Yes.
And that passes.
Okay, thank you. Our next item is 7 Delta, second agreement to Hanson Bridgett Professional Services Contract. Can you see the attachment?
All right, so as we earlier approved contracts for the upcoming fiscal year, we also have contracts that remain for the 2024-2025 fiscal year. In this year, we are expecting to exceed the original budget for Hanson Bridgett Services for a couple of different reasons. And so we're asking for an amendment, a second amendment to the Hanson Bridgett contract amount. So the initial amount was $880,000. That was entered into on July 1st of last year. In June, we entered into a separate agreement with Hanson Bridgett to provide specialized services to hire the recruiter who assisted in the new CEO search effort. And we had them hire the recruiter to maintain confidentiality. And then subsequent to the recruitment of the new CEO, me, that we have had some expenditures related to the retirement of the prior CEO and the pay schedule item that we just talked about that was related to last year. And so there were unanticipated legal expenses. We also had more work on the water supply amendment, which just passed the SFPUC than expected. And so these unanticipated legal expenses require us to ask for an adjustment. The adjustment is now $80,000. So that the revised total contract amount would be set at $985,000. I think I already overspoke on this, so there is the same things that I was just talking about: the pay schedules, the retirement of Nicole Sankula, and the water supply amendment. We do have offsetting lower expenses. Again, earlier I mentioned that we anticipated spending 90 to 95% of the budget for 24-25. Part of that are consultant services that were not expended or will not be expended. We often budget for complex items to be happening with respect to the CIP, for example. Well, we were kind of an interim year with respect to the CIP. The big work on the CIP at San Francisco is every other year. And so there's money to be found in other consultant contracts for 24-25. So in recommending the increase to Hanson Bridgett, we're not recommending an increase in the overall budget or assessments commensurate with that increase. And the BPC did recommend that the board authorize the amendment.
Okay, any questions from the board? Any comments from the public? Okay, Director Montano.
How did you come up with that figure?
The 80,000?
That 900 and, the 80,000, yeah.
The 80,000 additional was enumerated by Hanson Bridgett. I don't know that I have it here, but it was for those work items identified. They give us itemized bills on all the things that they do. So I don't know if Allison, did you have a way of addressing that?
Certainly. So on the I think you have the slide up there. So we had tracked our water supply agreement spendings. We had a budgeted amount at the beginning of the year, but as the negotiations continued, we were able to track the last few months what those additional costs were. And similarly, in the fall, when we did corrective action around the CalPERS pay schedules, we had a CalPERS specific billing number. And so we were able to track that in October, November, December timeframe. And so those were two, like the second item was totally out of scope. That was not scoped at all last year. But since we can have matter tracking by month, we were able to come up with these figures and we discussed them with the CEO. Similarly, the hiring the recruiting consultant, when we did the budget last year, Nicole had not yet decided to retire at that time. So her retirement costs were not included in the original scope of the legal contract. So we just, when there's out of scope items, and if we try to move scope around and defer and move things to the following fiscal year, and when we run out of space to do that, then we will negotiate for a contract amendment.
Thank you. You mentioned CalPERS. Is that the work that you did, or is that you as a contractor get CalPERS? Can you?
No, it's so CalPERS has very specific requirements around publishing salary schedules, and we had been publishing on the website with a link for many years, but we don't have many retirements at BAWSCA, so we hadn't discussed or engaged with CalPERS much about that over the last couple of years. It had been a while since we had a retirement from BAWSCA. So when Nicole began her retirement process with CalPERS, they said, oh no, we don't like the way that you're publishing your salary schedules. We want you to take corrective action. And so we had a lot of back and forth with our employee benefits experts at Hanson Bridgett to work with CalPERS to make sure that you're shipshape and everything is perfect, so that when the next retiree, first Ms. Sankula, the next series of retirees, it's just clean as a whistle and CalPERS has no questions. And so we had to make some modifications over a couple of BPC and a board meeting.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay, any other questions for board members? Any questions from the public? Seeing none, I'm open for a motion.
I'll move that.
Second.
Okay, Ms. Andrews,
Move or second.
Director Andrews made the motion, and who was the second?
Montano.
Montano was the second. Okay, roll call.
Director Andrews.
Aye.
Director Bro.
Yes, yes.
Director Chambers.
Yes.
Director Duncan.
Yes.
Director Hamilton.
Yes.
Director Hardy.
Yes.
Director Jordan.
Yes.
Director Kiesel.
Aye.
Director Lincoln. Director Mellinger.
Yes.
Director Mickelson. Director Montano.
Yes.
Director Nash?
Yes.
Director Pierce?
Yes.
Director Ragsdale?
Yes.
Director Schneider? Director Showalter? Director Stevenson?
Yes.
Director Stone?
Yes.
Director Vella?
Yes.
Director Weed?
Aye.
Director Zichterman?
Yes.
And that passes.
Okay, thank you. Our next item on the agenda, reports and discussions, BAWSCA Strategy 2050 planning session. Dr. Asori.
All right. Good evening, Board of Directors. I am Nagina Shuri. I'm the Senior Water Resource Engineer at BAWSCA, and I'm also the project leader for BAWSCA's long-term reliable water supply strategy, what we call Strategy 2050. This is in partnership with EKI, and we are lucky to have Andre Lee with us here tonight, and she is the project lead on the EKI side, and she's worked at BAWSCA for many years as well, so she's very familiar with all of your agencies. And tonight we're going to kind of talk to you all about what we've been working on in the last few months regarding Strategy 2050, and hopefully get some input from all of you on the risks impacting each of your agencies as well as the BAWSCA region. So this is just the agenda for today. I will be talking about the goals for today's board planning session, and then I'll give a brief background and overview on Strategy 2050 and our objectives, and then I'll hand it over to Andre to focus on that scenario planning for Strategy 2050, the purpose of it, the scenario development process, and then we'll have a discussion and get your input on the scenario planning. And then we'll talk about next steps, both for the scenario planning as well as the rest of Strategy 2050. We've heard a lot about affordability, and you'll see in the next slides that that is a part of Strategy 2050, a really large core part of it. So this is the schedule, as part of the development of Strategy 2050, which we're hoping to be done in the next 2 years. We will be regularly updating you all on what we're working on so far. And so shown on this slide are the planning sessions for this year specifically, for 2025. And today we will focus on the review of reliability risks. So we're going to share information on the scenario planning and review and discuss risks to water supply reliability. And then engage with you all to provide some input on the potential scenario future scenarios. And we're hoping that the other 2 planning scenarios that are planned for later this year will focus on some of those project concepts. These are local water supply and demand management projects, as well as programs and policies that we might be looking at in the future. And then we're hoping at the end of the year to also be reviewing some of the research that we're going to be doing on the affordability within the region. Now, as we go through the discussion tonight, I really want you to have this, consider the following questions as we review the next few slides. So which of the identified challenges that we're going to be showing to you tonight resonate the most with you and your agency and the BAWSCA region? What other major challenges do you think the BAWSCA region could face over the next 25 years? And then what specific aspect of a challenge that we're going to be talking about tonight should be further explored? Now, these questions are really meant to guide our dialogue tonight, and we really want to ensure we're shaping a strategy that reflects the full range of our perspectives for the BAWSCA region. And these are also similar discussion questions that were presented to all of your respective agencies, as well as the discussion that we had at the prior BPC meeting. Now, just to give a brief background on how we developed the scope of work for Strategy 2050, we first began establishing its purpose with discussions with both the board and the WMR, the water management representatives. We really revised that purpose for for the Strategy 2050 to be to identify the water supply management needs and opportunities for the BAWSCA region and establish a framework to collectively support water reliability and resilience. From there, we identified the needs of each of the agencies through agency surveys. We talked to each of your agencies, we talked to the board, and all of you last year in scoping the development of Strategy 2050, and we came up with 6 specific objectives on what we want to focus on for Strategy 2050. These objectives touch upon understanding the region's supply and demand needs, new and emerging regulations, expanding collaboration amongst the agencies in the region, kind of closing the gap on funding for some of these projects that we might be looking at in the future, and then supporting affordable water supply strategies for customers. So today we're going to focus on that first one to provide a comprehensive picture of the region's supply of demand and management needs and options. This objective really helps us to really understand what exactly we should be focusing on in regards to our water supply and demand management needs, and that's what we're going to be focusing on tonight. Now, BAWSCA's goal has always been to ensure that a reliable, high-quality supply of water is available at a fair price. And we want to always keep that in mind as we're going through this with Strategy 2050. But just to clarify how Strategy 2050 fits into our existing responsibilities at BAWSCA, this work is very separate from BAWSCA's overseeing the water supply agreement with SFPUC. So that agreement will continue. It continues to be one of our core missions, particularly with ensuring that SFPUC meets its contractual obligations. But this Strategy 2050 goes beyond. So it allows us to take a more broader, more proactive role in addressing the regional water supply reliability issues that are occurring now and in the future. From local projects to collaborating investments to long-range planning. So it's about looking beyond what's contractually required and towards what's strategically necessary for our future. And so we saw in previous slides, currently BAWSCA has numerous both core and subscription programs. It touches on water conservation, we're looking at water loss, we look at water quality, and this is looking at ways in which we might expand on that, things that can touch upon other projects that we can look at beyond just a physical project, some of the programs and policies we might be looking at in the future. Now this is just like a timeline of not only the Strategy 2050 development, but beyond that, what we're going to be looking at. So in the next 2 years, we want to develop the plan for advancing these objectives, to quantify what the needs might be, to evaluate potential actions. I say that potential, what could potentially happen in the future, and then determining what BAWSCA's role is in all that, and then identifying an implementation plan. Our hopes are after 2027 is to implement some of these potential actions that are identified in the plan, and then we're going to track and report on its progress. And the goal is really to have a living strategy. We don't want a static report on specifically what projects we're going to move forward with, but it really will help us in responding to future water supply reliability risks. That could be drought, population growth, regulatory shifts, and other factors that really might arise in the future. So it's really designed to evolve with what future conditions might be. And some of the anticipated outcomes with this is, we want to have a comprehensive report that includes a summary of what our key findings will be and insights gained throughout the development phase. We want a strategic roadmap for achieving these goals and objectives that I've pointed out, those 6 specific objectives. And then a method for progress tracking and reporting of the status of Strategy 2050 implementation. And then again, as I mentioned, this adaptive management framework for implementation. So we are going to allow for some flexibility and responsiveness in changing conditions. And that really touches on some of the scenario planning of understanding what those futures might be and how we can adapt to them. So now that we discussed the background of Strategy 2050, I'm going to hand it over to Andre to kind of dive into the scenario planning and what we've learned so far.
Thank you, Nagin, and good evening, Chair Chambers and members of the board. I appreciate the opportunity to be here with you tonight to share some of the work to date on Strategy 2050, and more importantly, to get your input to help us as we move forward. As many of you have alluded to in your comments tonight already, the one thing that we know for sure as we plan for the future is that it is highly uncertain. Scenario planning is an approach that we use in these long-term planning processes to help us plan for water supply and demand management reliability in the face of these future unknowns. Specifically, scenario planning is a structured approach to thinking about the future and different potential outcomes we might see. It begins with developing plausible narratives based upon big picture future changes affecting our region overall. These scenarios are then used to help us identify and evaluate interventions, things like projects, programs, or policies, to help us support favorable outcomes for all of us, depending on how these uncertainties unfold. When we think about the scenarios, we're not just thinking about things related to water supply. It's helpful to think about these scenarios in broader terms, framing them in the context of larger environmental, societal, regulatory, and socioeconomic uncertainties. As we move forward with Strategy 2050, scenario planning is a foundational step to help guide the rest of the effort. We're beginning by developing the future planning scenarios, specifically identifying 4 possible future scenarios that we think represent a reasonable bound of what might happen through 2050. We are then developing project and action concepts and evaluating how these future scenarios might be helped or aided by some of these actions, specifically looking at portfolios of actions and the benefits that they might provide under these different futures. All of this information will then roll into a flexible implementation plan to help guide future actions and decisions that BAWSCA may take depending on how the future unfolds. Before we jump into the scenario planning specifically, I do want to take a moment to touch on the relationship between Strategy 2050 scenario planning and BAWSCA's Regional Demand and Conservation Projections project. Both of these studies include scenario planning elements, and they are interlinked and talking to each other, so to speak. Specifically, BAWSCA is currently finishing up the demand models for each of the member agencies as part of the demand study. Those demand models will then be used to develop future demand scenarios, building on some of the input that has been provided through the stakeholder engagement to date. And that input will feed directly into our Strategy 2050 scenario matrix to help us place a bounds on future water demand, so to speak. To begin the Strategy 2050 scenario planning process, BAWSCA held some planning sessions, both with the water management representatives from each of your agencies and also with the board policy committee to support the development of the scenarios. The goal of these planning sessions was specifically to identify the risks impacting water supply reliability, both at local agency levels and at the BAWSCA regional level, and then take some initial steps to quantify the potential effect of these risks on water supply. Through these planning sessions, we've identified more than 50 drivers of change that may have impact on water reliability. After identifying the drivers, these drivers were evaluated based on both their relative impact to water supply reliability, if they do occur, as well as the degree of uncertainty that we face around each of them. The chart that you see up here is an example of what one breakout group produced through these exercises. And as we move forward into the scenario planning, we're really focusing on that circled area in the top left, which represents those drivers of change that have both a high degree of uncertainty as well as a potential high impact. To summarize some of the key takeaways from these planning sessions, what we're showing here is the water supply risks with the greatest potential impact as well as the highest degree of uncertainty. There are a range of risks, but they can be broadly grouped into 8 categories, including state and federal infrastructure development, funding, climate change, state-issued restrictions, drought, the Bay Delta Plan, demand changes, and affordability. There are also a couple risks that were discussed quite a bit and are certainly going to be very impactful in the region, specifically aging infrastructure and water quality regulations, but are more certain. We know that these are things that are likely to come down. They don't have that same band of uncertainty as some of the other risks. These, That's what I get for talking with my hands.
Here we go.
Thank you. To incorporate these uncertainties into Strategy 2050, we first grouped them into these major categories to form what we're calling the primary factors of change, and then together group them further into what we're calling thematic uncertainties, which make up the axes of our scenario matrix that I'll show you shortly. These thematic uncertainties include supply availability, regional development, and water rates and affordability as our primary drivers. So what does that look like from a scenario matrix perspective? What we're showing you here is the summary of the scenario matrix and major assumptions within that. You'll see what the y-axis here is reflects the supply uncertainty, ranging from high supply availability to lower supply availability. On the x-axis, that groups the uncertainties related to regional development. Specifically, will we see more development and associated population jobs and housing to reflect that increased regional development, or more stable development patterns consistent with current trends? As you think about how the specific scenarios are formed within these bounds, I'm just going to give you a high-level example of what you might see in one of them. So in quadrant A on the matrix, this would represent a future scenario with high water supply availability and more development. Some of the specific assumptions within that might be the Bay Delta Plan voluntary agreements implemented in perpetuity. On the state infrastructure side, implementation of the Delta Conveyance Project and associated supply benefits. No changes in the local supply availability for your agencies, and more favorable climate change outcomes with lower impacts to water supplies. On the more development side of that, you might see increases in jobs, favorable economic conditions, and associated housing growth and population growth. As you move to the other scenarios, scenario B differs from scenario A on the development side. So you'd see similar supply conditions, but more stable development consistent with current conditions. And then on the bottom end, you would see the lower supply availability scenarios. So specifically, Bay Delta Plan, 40% unimpaired flow on the San Francisco Regional Water System, similar issues on the Delta Conveyance Project not being implemented, and reduction in local supply reliability. Not going to walk through all of the details in each one, but I'm hoping you're seeing the framework and how we're able to use this tool to put some bounds on reasonable assumptions and potential future outcomes. So now that we've shared how this approach works at a high level, I would like to hear from you to ensure continued collaboration and get your input in this process as we really start on the Strategy 2050 work. We're seeking input from the board on the following questions. Specifically, which of these challenges identified resonate the most with you? Are there things that we're missing, other major challenges that you think the BAWSCA region could face over the next 25 years? And within the identified challenges, are there specific aspects of challenge that you think it is important that we further dive into and explore? That concludes my presentation. I'm happy to take questions and more importantly, get your thoughts.
Okay, Director Andrews. It's all right, I know who you are.
Thank you for your presentation. Wanted to highlight that I'm seeing climate change on here and just want to know if we can go deeper into that specific discussion from the group so I can understand what were their specific issues with climate change that they brought up.
Certainly. Some of the themes that came up within the broader topic of climate change were on the uncertainty related to how climate change will impact water supplies, both locally and from the regional water system, as well as potential impacts to weather and the associated impacts on water use.
Okay, great. So two things related to that. I would like to highlight or elevate sea level rise on critical infrastructure to make sure that we are considering opportunities for early adoption in case there is more regulations that come down. I think what we're seeing, at least on the wastewater side, is that the agencies that were early adopters for removing nutrients are benefiting versus the other agencies that are seeing these big swings and it's impacting sewer rates. So if we could figure out what are some opportunities for that, I'll be interested in seeing that. I'll also be interested in seeing how we can continue to collaborate with other consortiums and other groups to figure out how to be early adopters. I think that would be helpful. Of course, affordability I also am concerned about, so look forward to more discussion on that. And then also, I know there's been a lot of conversation about drought. Just want to make sure that we're also considering the impacts of climate change as it relates to fire. There's a lot of people that I know were impacted by the SoCal fires. So just seeing how the work here can help inform us being prepared for those kinds of emergencies. And then just continue outreach, especially for communities that are area of greatest need in terms of getting that infrastructure upgraded to make sure we have water supplies in those areas. That's all, thanks.
Thank you, very helpful feedback. We have heard similar themes regarding opportunities for collaboration and thinking ahead related to sea level rise.
Okay, Director Hardy, followed by Director Weed.
Thank you. If anyone read through the policy board minutes, we went around the room and asked about some of this, and aging infrastructure is a big concern. And we all know that for our specific entities, we have to make a lot of plans and make certain that something we don't see every day and we very much rely on. A lot of people take it for granted that there will be water coming out of the tap. And this aging infrastructure is, and I didn't really see it in your circle, and that was worrying me because we're responsible for our specific agencies, but BAWSCA is a water delivery. And that, you know, aging infrastructure is something we really have to think about and plan for. Thank you.
Okay, Director Reed, followed by Director Zichterman.
Yes. 25 years is not long-term planning in the water world. That's what we're doing in our current engineering ops, and we're starting projects that last that long. In the past 2 years since I've been on this board, this charter, we've seen the cost of San Francisco water go from $1 a unit to $6 a unit today. You had a consultant for SFPUC on saying that climate change could raise that to $35 a unit, another six-fold increase. And it would be interesting to see what he backed that up with, because if you look at the capital expenditures necessary, we built $6 billion worth of WISIP on a $2 per unit increase. Would be a $99 billion investment if we went to $35 per unit. So there has to be some level of rationality. If we look at the plans you're basing this on, the Bay Delta plan has a 2035 timeline. Sea level rise is not a consideration. I'm on the Delta Conveyance, the Tunnel Design and Construction Authority Board. Our CEQA calls for 10.2 foot sea level rise and to the year 2200. The Delta Masters said that they could only handle about 2 feet of that. In geological times, there's been 300 feet of sea level change. So it's not that much, and it's conceivable. But the Delta's doomed, and that should be part of your plan, but it goes probably to the end of this current planning effort of 25 years. You should be looking at the black swans that can pop up on an annual basis of water quality regulations, microplastics, hormones, pharmaceuticals, which could be a huge hit. And regulatory compliance becomes our primary driver. So we've got some major challenges coming up, but hopefully we keep in mind the perspective and a reference of what we're trying to do. This is not a long-term plan, and I encourage you to put a narrative in onto what the long-term issues might be after 2050.
Okay, thank you. Director Zichterman, followed by Director Mellinger.
Thank you, Chair. I want to thank the staff for incorporating some of our risks discussions from these meetings. It's really nice to see kind of a broader approach and framework for dealing with these. We've got obviously the risks of uncertain climate impacts. They could be severe, as Director Reed points out. We don't know if snowmelt normally is going to be less, let alone the droughts more severe and longer and more frequent. We have the indefinite population growth. Is California population going to grow? It's not right now. So, and even if it does, at what rate does the water demand increase? Because we're getting more efficient with water in general. So there's a lot of those uncertainties and risks. And of course, the financial impacts of overbuilding and overspending on alternative supplies to meet those unusual times when we do need water without severe cutbacks. We don't want to build too much and have high unaffordable rates. We need to make sure that all of our folks can afford water. This isn't something that we need to make sure we can afford. It's that everyone can afford. It's a basic necessity of life. But I want to throw one more level of risk consideration on the table, and that is, what is our expectation of SFPUC? Are we all going to depend on them for every drop of potable water that we ever need? Or like our maintenance of our own infrastructure, when it wears out, we have to replace it. That's our job. Is there a level at which the reliance on SFPUC to build expensive regional alternative supplies to serve us all in those once every how many thousands of years it occurs, is that really appropriate? Or do we take on some risks, and some communities may decide we don't want any risk, we're going to build our own parallel desal plant or whatever that might be, for those rare times when we don't have enough SFPUC water. Could we possibly agree on SFPUC provides 90-something% of the water, overall average, but in those rare drought times, we're on our own. And we have to do something about that if we want to have that assurance of adequate supply. So I think a policy risk question might be, should we be thinking about a limit to the dependence on SFPUC for all of our water? And we can all afford them providing 90-something%, but we recognize and accept ourselves as individual agencies that we need to provide the rest for our customers. However we choose locally to do that, whether it's groundwater as storage, because there are dams all around the bay. Besides groundwater aquifers, there are surface storage opportunities. Package treatment plants could do a lot with that stored non-potable water to make it potable. You got fire flows to make sure you have, so all those have to be balanced. But maybe that's where our individual agencies have to be responsible. I'm just throwing that out there as another potential part of the discussion. Thank you.
Okay, Director Mellinger, followed by Director Jordan.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. In January of this year, the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers opened 2 dams in Central California, releasing 2.2 billion gallons of water for no good reason. Apparently, the president thought that it was a good idea. I raise this point to mention that one of the concerns that we are facing that is not directly called out on that lovely slide is the rising national and international political instability that we are seeing in the country and in the world. And if there is one thing that I think is a truism, it is that political instability has ramifications in the water world, and that those ramifications are not good. I would like to make sure that as we examine this plan, and as we consider indeed the dangers that Director Ziegderman called out on overbuilding, that we are considering the potential impact of political instability on water supply, and I'd like to sketch out a potential scenario for that. The Bay Area, even in the well-advanced phase of climate change that we find ourselves in, maintains mild weather throughout the year. Even in summer, for the most part, at least on the peninsula, temperatures remain quite mild. In the event of a severe drought, that could mean a refugee influx into the bay, which would mean that even as water supplies are declining, demand increases quite suddenly and sharply. That is one potential scenario that we should be prepared for as we consider this 25-year plan. How do we deal not just with the sort of 4-quadrant grid that you laid out of, which is all couched in sort of gradual long-term things. Okay, housing growth is something that does not go in spurts generally. The outcome of the Bay Delta plan is going to take some years to resolve, I imagine, but also how we deal with shocks and how we ensure that our water supply system is as protected as we can from the unexpected, the surprising, and the sudden. And so that is what I would like to call out. I'd also like to say I greatly appreciate Director Andrews' comments on sea level rise. I do think that this is important, and working to, much of our critical water infrastructure is on the bay, and so working to ensure that that is protected from sea level rise is going to be very important. Anyway, I am going to turn off my microphone now, and thank you very much for your consideration.
Okay, Director Jordan, followed by Director Stone.
Yeah, thank you for this. It's looks like a great start. You may have put this in demand changes, but this is, 2050 is 3.5 housing element cycles from now, roughly. So that is, for us, we could double our housing in that week, or the demand from the state could be that you have to double it if we run through 3.5 cycles, given what they've done. So we need to make sure that we allow for how much it could be. I don't know where the people are coming from, but you know, assuming that they look at that. And then secondly, a concern that I have looking at this, as we have an increased dependence upon recycled water, what if there's some major event that raises questions about the quality of recycled water? You know, what's in the recycled water? Have we got all the bad stuff out? But if it becomes a major source of the water supply, then, you know, we have to make sure that we have other sources in case something bad is discovered. Thanks.
Okay, Director Stone after, and followed by Director Snyder.
Thank you, Chair, and thanks to staff for this. Obviously, affordability continues to be greatest challenge. Glad to see we are continuing to focus on it. I agree with so many comments made. Definitely want to align my comments as well with Director Zichterman. Completely agree with everything that he said. I think the uncertainty is clear, and our ability to be able to adapt to that uncertainty. I can see significant political changes across the state. I think we've already started to see some of those changes, and what could that mean for us as far as funding and just the political will to get this done? Because if we lose the political will, something with this price tag is really not going to go anywhere, especially with reasonable uncertainties that exist. And also just being able to, I'm curious to see more about how we adapt to changing technology with things like desalination costs being driven down, as well as the clear movement towards centralized water systems, and with our ability to decentralize then kind of solutions to water, like in-home and in-office water recycling, I think is really going to shift our demand, and so would also like to see as well modifying our demand forecasting to make sure that we are avoiding really costly overinvestments and ensure that our planning really remains grounded in what the data is showing us. So I think definitely the uncertainty is there. Are we building enough to be able to adapt to that uncertainty and to meet the true demands? So thank you.
Okay, Director Snyder, followed by Director Hamilton.
Again, and thank you to all the previous one. I loved all the points. Did discuss this at policy, but since policy committee, CAL FIRE has come out with their new fire map. So my community is now at high risk. We were not at high risk before, and we're at high risk, sorry, Steve, because of the SFPUC land. So I double the fire risk on that. I think the other problem, Director Zichterman, I really like your perspective. In my field, we tend to go towards not siloing and then siloing again. And what I had tried to do while I was a council member with our east side, which is predominantly owned by SFO, is a great place to do groundwater aquifer recharge and stormwater retention, and we have actually had people drown in atmospheric rivers. And the problem I see with staff, and I love staff, please don't get me wrong, but we've got water staff and we've got staff over here. So to get our jobs done, we silo. But I think part of the problem is we can't silo. We have to look at solving multiple environmental problems with a more complicated system on that. And then it's the funding. And then does Millbrae do it by itself? Do we try to partner with San Bruno? Do we try to partner with Burlingame? Maybe that's another way that we could be looking at opportunities on that. For me, I wanted to do a habitat conservation plan on our east side, but the new city council, a very conservative city council, will not even look at how to look at monetizing entities that have to fund their, let's look at Genentech in South City. They no longer can do any work in South City, so they actually spent money down in other parts of the Bay Area to do habitat conservation. Or PG&E did a project in Millbrae, and they sent that money to Pescadero for the same red-legged frogs and garter snakes that we have in Millbrae. So habitat conservation plan is a way to monetize those operations. So I think we might have to really stretch this. And I threw in my notes earthquake. Maybe it's because we're on the fault. Millbrae's on the fault. if the pipes break. But I learned something from Woodside's big fire is we need to be changing our plants to plants that maintain more moisture in them, which reduces our fire risk on that. So there's an awful lot of parts in here, so I always appreciate everything you say. But I would throw those in, and I appreciate the fire on that. But I really think the biggest problem is, and I don't mean to insult any of us who are elected officials, they don't all come with an environmental science background, so this is really speaking Greek to them. It's really hard to grasp looking at an ecosystem process on that. Thanks.
Director Hamilton, followed by Director Showalter.
Thank you. I really appreciate all the great comments from colleagues here. This is a great discussion, and I appreciate this opportunity. There are several challenges on this list that resonate with me the most, and they all orbit the biggest challenge on the list, which is climate change. So our infrastructure simply isn't designed to handle the wild swings between flood and drought. That's now the new normal, nor the expected sea level rise that's coming with climate change. So not only do we need to figure out what infrastructure changes we can make to mitigate these risks as much as possible, but how to fund those changes, and then also to fund those changes while being mindful of affordability for our ratepayers. So it's, when you ask about which of these are resonate with me most, it's almost like all of them, because they're all so intertwined. So I wanted to share that. Thank you.
Okay, Director Showalter, followed by Director Montano.
Yeah, I'm going to talk about the intertwined nature. First of all, when you mention earthquakes, that's a major disruption immediately. That could be caused by a number of things. It could be caused by political instability or terrorism, and it could be caused by, I read a lot of mystery stories, it comes up. And it could be caused by, it could be caused by an earthquake. And we've been planning for that for many, many years, and we don't want to forget to continue to plan for that because it's just a part of the geologic structure here. I wanted, as a BCDC commissioner, I wanted to remind everybody that we are all on the hook to make regional shoreline adaptation plans if we are shoreline cities. And those need to be completed by 2034. And we just got our guidelines finished at the end of 2034. Did I say? Yeah. So we have 10 years to make these plans under the law. But of course, as you mentioned, the earlier we do it, the better, right? And one of the things that is available for all of our jurisdictions is funding from the state to help with this planning. So I just wanted to let everybody know that that's available, and it's a rotating thing. I think they do it quarterly. It's through the Ocean Protection Council. So that's how we, the one water world, a little connection. I also wanted to bring up conservation. Conservation is the cheapest form of water supply. It just is. And so we really want to, I think, continue to push the envelope on innovation. I mean, really, when you look at most of the conservation, the reduction in water supply that we see in the statistics, it's a huge amount of it is attributed to the change in toilets. I mean, you think about it, and 30, 40 years ago, every time you flushed your toilet, I think it was 5.2 gallons, and now it's 1.6. Some of them are even less. That's a huge amount of water. We all do that. Most of us flush the toilet 10 times a day, and you add that up, that's a lot of flushing. Then recycled water. I wanted to mention recycled water. Mountain View and Palo Alto are actively involved in building a advanced purification plant to reduce, to treat some of our wastewater, and we aren't expecting that this water is going to be put to potable uses. We are thinking that we want to right size the quality of water for the use. So this saltier water is going to be really good for irrigation. It's good for flushing toilets or urinals. It's good for cooling towers, that sort of thing. So that was an exciting thing that happened on Tuesday night. We heard that the contract from the engineers' estimates had come through, and so we okayed some money, and we're hoping Palo Alto will follow through, and really appreciate the collaboration between that. So that's why I want to say this right now. Thank you.
Okay, Director Montano, followed by Director Brew. Director Montano?
Thank you, Chair. So thank you for your presentations. I have a couple of comments. So the affordability, that is really important. And I know that every year the prices go up, the rates go up. But I think having a handle of the affordability is really important because, you know, it was mentioned earlier that it was low-income people, but that's not the case anymore. It's affecting the middle class. And that's why I'm saying we need to get a handle on the affordability about with our rates. So the middle class is being impacted from these skyrocketing rates. The other thing is our aging infrastructure in our cities. That's a huge endeavor that many cities, we just can't afford to fix the infrastructure, you know, the conduits underneath. So that's a huge one, and I'm pretty sure all the cities that are here represented here have the same problem as Karen Hardy had mentioned. Also, I was also thinking, you know, it wasn't mentioned here about groundwater, and at one time I witnessed, and that was Hetch Hetchy. They were dumping water into the, I guess it was one of the years I had we had so much water that they dumped water into the creeks, and I was thinking, wow, can you imagine if we could just use that water to recharge, you know, some of the underground water, you know, that I think maybe looking into that would be a great thing instead of just dumping it and, you know, recharge the groundwater. Another one is irrigation district. You know, we have some antiquated water rights that's been, and I don't know if that's ever going to be fixed, but it seems to me, I think the state of California, I think the farmers take a huge percentage of our water, and then we, the cities, have to compensate for that water use. But I'd like to see some of the farmers not plant so many trees. You know, it's the agribusiness. They should start planting crops that use less water. So that's another area that maybe the agribusiness needs to be addressed. Again, with I think it was John Weed mentioned about the water quality. Yeah, that's a huge problem. Plastics in our water, even the beaches. And there was a study that even the scientists did some studies on the rain clouds, and they found even little microplastics in rainwater. So that's a big problem. Then it was mentioned about the housing element. This was Steve Jordan. So there seems to be the state is saying there's a housing crisis, but I tell you, there's not a housing crisis. It's a housing affordability crisis. It's the affordability. I mean, you go throughout the state, there's a lot of empty houses, empty apartments. It's just the affordability. And I'm hoping that the housing element, if we get some new legislation, that can go away, because HCD, the Housing, I think it's Development Corporation, they're the ones that are kind of shoving that down our throats, the cities. We really need to make sure that hopefully it'll change, so we won't have that that housing element mandates. And I do like how you said that all the water faucets, all the toilets, that makes a huge difference. So now we're the modernization of all those what do you call them? You call those for the facilities, toilets, waters, all that. Yeah, fixtures, there you go, there you go. So, and again, I like it, what you said about conservation. We need to continue conservation education, that's really important. That's really important. So, anyway, those are some of my thoughts. Yeah, that's it. Just want to make sure.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Director Burrow, followed by Director Andrews.
Thank you, Chair. So I think I'll be the third or fourth member to pivot off of Director Zuckerman's thoughtful comments on it, which I took to be a request that we do an analysis of a scenario where SFPUC is unable to meet their level of service. And if that's not already captured in your low supply availability scenario, I would also encourage that we do that, just because I think there are some outstanding questions by many members as to whether there are alternative scenarios where we can provide self-service that is more cost-effective and that's more reliable than depending 100% on SFPUC. Thank you.
Okay, Director Andrews.
Thank you, I'll be brief. Just because I'm from Hayward, I just want to double tap on the Hayward Fault earthquake mention, so I just want to say that for the record. But also, I was interested in looking at potential public-private partnerships. This is something I've been talking about with other agencies because it seems to be a lot of reliance on sewer rates and water rates that are hitting the residents. And this is an issue that's impacting everyone. And just want to acknowledge that we're in the Bay Area. We have $4 trillion companies just in the Bay Area. And these rates are hitting the backs of low income, middle income, and some individual high income earners where a lot of these improvements can literally be paid for by one person. So I just want to see if there's any opportunities that we can look at in terms of addressing climate change in a way that benefits their companies, show that this is a good investment. We're in the Bay Area. You would not be able to invent any of the things that you're making money off of without water. So how can you help give back? And it could be a potential tax write-off. I don't know. But just something that connect that the residents can't afford these infrastructure improvements, and we're seeing decreasing availability of funds to address it. So, thanks.
Okay, Director Pierce.
I think you've got more than you need, but as I was thinking about it, the only thing that isn't included here is sort of the competing interests compounded by the legal system. So we're competing, all of our agencies are different. All of us have different financial models, different ways we support ourselves, different economic levels. And we're all competing for water with ag, over whom we have no control, and all of these other regulations. So I think there's this just sort of being aware of all of that competition, and if there's a way to bring more collaboration. And I think that the way you're approaching it is really helpful, and at least if we can be collaborative here to try to solve our problems and look at opportunities and explore, I think that's beneficial, but there's this big chaos outside.
Okay, thank you. Unless there's further comments, would like to continue?
I hope you heard enough.
We did, yes.
I will say that we can't start a new thing until after 2 hours and 15 minutes of a meeting, meaning we can't start a topic after 8:45, and it's now 9:09. After this, I want her to finish. We need to have a vote if we want to have the CEO reports, and I have one public comment. So I'm going to ask for an extension after this thing finishes.
I will be quick. This is just, and I appreciate all your comments here tonight. This was really helpful for us. These are just the next steps. We're going to be finalizing the 4 planning scenarios, considering all of your inputs tonight. And then we'll be completing the risk analysis portion and share the results at another board meeting in the future. And then, as I had mentioned before, we have other planning sessions planned for not only 2025, we have 2 more planned for this year, but we'll have more in 2026 as well. And we're also engaging with stakeholders, outsider stakeholders. The next meeting is actually next Tuesday. We have a One Water roundtable to really share some information on water reliability projects being considered and really collaborate on some other project ideas for Strategy 2050. This is just a little background on what the One Water Roundtable series is. It actually started back in 2022, and it's the foundation of how we started Strategy 2050. It helped with scoping it, and we have brought together people from the BAWSCA member agencies, NGOs, counties, and other water and wastewater agencies, and leaders and experts in water related fields. And we're really hoping to get some other ideas on projects and the project concepts, as well as programs and policies that we might be looking at. So that's taking place next Tuesday. So we're looking forward to that. Thank you.
And I stand corrected, I have one public comment. Oh, Director Nash.
I have one question. That's in your matrix. How are you considering the housing needs? When you look at the stable development versus more development on that spectrum, how are you considering the regional housing needs assessment, the housing element requirements?
Thank you for that question. A lot of that work is being explored as part of the demand study and looking at the scenarios within there. So the regional housing needs assessment, broadly speaking, would fall under the more development side.
Okay, any other comments? I have one public comment on 8A on this report. Peter Druckmeyer, you want to?
Well, I've probably outstayed my welcome. Thank you all for your patience. Peter Dreckmar, Tuolumne River Trust. I was mentioning before that Los Vaqueros expansion is no longer happening. The Daly City Recycled Water Project has been shelved. Calaveras expansion a while back was kind of ruled out, at least in the short term. The purified water with Alameda County Water District is shelved, leaving 2 projects on the 6-project list, Mid-Peninsula Pure Water and South Bay Pure Water. I sent you a letter a year ago. I'll send it again tomorrow, but I have concerns that South Bay Pure Water does not conform to Prop 218. I think 24 BAWSCA agencies would be subsidizing Santa Clara and San Jose. I think you should make that a priority in your work plan to just get a quick assessment of that before investing any more water in that or any more money. You know, the solution is a partnership with the irrigation districts to do groundwater recharge in the Central Valley. Tremendous potential there. Way cheaper than doing stuff in the Bay Area. Reason you don't hear about it is because they don't want to reveal that there are solutions. There's an interesting figure in the LTVA, Long-Term Vulnerability Assessment Climate Change Study, that the Bay Delta Plan is the equivalent of a 15% increase in demand. But the demand they use in that study is 240 million gallons per day, which is 20 to 25% higher than demand's been for the last 10 years. So you can look at every graph in that, and you can say, hey, if demand stays the same, this is the impact of the Bay Delta Plan, and it's not scary. One piece of good news is we looked at earlier runoff, so the projection is 3 weeks earlier. We looked at the design drought, we know what that is. We looked at what happened during those years of the design drought. We shifted it by 3 weeks, and what we found is water moves from entitlements to the irrigation districts to the SFPUC, more than a year's worth of water. And the SFPUC never responded to our analysis because it works against the gloom and doom scenario that we can't live with the Bay Delta Plan. Be happy to share our information with anyone who's interested. Thank you for your patience.
Okay, any other comments on item 8A? Okay, I think we can finish in 20 minutes, which would, if somebody wants to make a motion to extend the meeting for 20 minutes, which is...
Through the chair, I'll make a motion that we extend the meeting to 9:40.
Okay.
Second.
Okay. Primary Hamilton, second Pierce.
All right, on the roll call.
Roll call.
Director Andrews.
Aye.
Director Bro.
Sorry, I need a minute because I just want to say how much I do very much appreciate our new CEO's approach, where he gives us very lengthy written reports to prepare ourselves for the meetings, and how he gives us short oral reports that provide a lot of room for discussion. But I've read his reports, and I don't need the time to do it, so I'm going to vote no and no.
All right, Director Chambers.
Yes.
Director Duncan.
Yes.
Director Hamilton.
Yes.
Director Hardy.
Yes.
Director Jordan. Okay, Director Kiesel. Director Lincoln. Director Manalo. Oh, sorry, not here. Director Mellinger.
No.
Director Mickelson. Director Montano. Director Nash.
Yes.
Director Piccolotti, not here, sorry. Director Pierce.
Yes, but please make it shorter than that.
It'll be shorter than that, yes. Director Ragsdale.
Yes.
Director Schneider.
Yes.
Director Showalter.
Yes.
Director Stevenson.
Yes.
Director Stone.
No.
Director Vella.
Yes.
Director Weed.
No.
Director Ziegterman.
Reluctantly, yes.
All right, I think the yeses
Okay.
have it, but.
Yeses have it. Thank you much. It's time for 9A, or CEO reports. Let's do A through D because 3 of them are attachments. And I really do want to thank on 8 for all the good comments. I would have loved to cut it off, but I couldn't have because they were too good of things.
All right, in light of the time, I'm going to break protocol and stay sitting here and report from here. So hopefully I can change the slides here. Not that anybody can read that. I certainly can't read it from here. So very quickly, we have not much of an update on the Bay Delta plan. I do want to highlight that we issued a statement on April 10th. It's in your correspondence packet. Continuing to support the request for the State Water Board to evaluate the Healthy Rivers and Landscapes program, and that was following San Francisco's letter to the governor that had been made earlier, I think in March, to ask them to continue that evaluation. The other things on here you've seen, continued engagement and no further updates on the factual situation with respect to the Bay Delta plan. Flipping to the next one, which is the water supply amendment, yay. I know we were excited 2.5 hours ago when we first announced this, and it's a little late now. But this was a tremendous amount of work. I know the board members turn over a lot, but do appreciate that the water supply representatives, agency representatives from all of your agencies spent 3 years working out the Tier 2 arrangement, and we spent similar amount of time working with San Francisco. So Danielle was the lead on that. She's not here. She broke her foot, so she couldn't drive down here basically tonight. And Allison Schutte, they did the bulk of the work for us with San Francisco, and thank you to Allison Castema and Steve Ritchie as well, who are here. It really facilitated that as well. So we do have information to your staff representatives, and we expect that the agencies will start to ratify both the WSA amendment and the Tier 2 plan update. We're available to help. Danielle and Tom and I are happy to go to any meetings and help. And feel free to reach out to us for any assistance on that or any education for your other council members or board members need in that regard. That is the end of my report. I think you had a
Okay, is any board members questions?
No questions, but just a
Okay,
comment.
I have public comment. Is Mary Butterwick still here?
She's moving up.
Okay, your 2 minutes after you start.
Long evening. My name is Mary Butterwick. I'm a resident of San Francisco, and I urge BAWSCA to drop its opposition to the Bay Delta plan. Last year, the Sacramento Superior Court ruled in favor of the State Water Board's 2018 Bay Delta plan update, which included in-stream flow standards for the Tuolumne. Now is the time to drop opposition to the Bay Delta plan and ensure flows in the Tuolumne are consistent with the state's adopted standards. The fall run Chinook salmon are in desperate need of increased flows. The Tuolumne has experienced the worst salmon population decline of any tributary in the San Joaquin or Sacramento rivers. Current policy releases, on average, only 12% of unimpaired flow between February and June in dry years when the fish need the water the most. This approach of managing flows in the lower Tuolumne River is unsustainable, and needs to change. The proposed Tuolumne River voluntary agreement cannot achieve the objectives of the Bay Delta Plan, primarily because it produces little in the way of new, protected, in-stream flows in the Tuolumne. The claim that one can produce more fish with less water is contrary to science and common sense. Archived videos of the 7 workshops hosted by SFPUC on this issue provide ample evidence for the need to increase flows in the Tuolumne. I am concerned that this voluntary agreement is essentially a delay tactic by water agencies to avoid the difficult decisions regarding the reasonable use of water in an over-appropriated system. Please drop your opposition to the Bay Delta Plan and save yourself some legal costs. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And I will get to Director Andrews in a second. We're closed session, we said we're going to cancel. So there's no report from closed session. For those who are interested, item 12, if we had extra time, which we don't tonight, but I would like to give the opportunity to have extended comment time from the public. And what I will say is I don't want to say it's a maximum 2 minutes. It's going to be a function of how much of that 2 hours and 15 minutes we have left over from our meeting. But today we don't have any. So since Director Andrews is a director and item 13 is director discussion and comments, go ahead.
I just want to give kudos to Tom Francis and to whoever went to Girls Middle School in Palo Alto International Forum Black Public Administrators, just doing great outreach there. So thank you for doing that.
Okay, any other comments from directors? Director Weed.
Make it briefly because it's important. San Francisco said that they're going to have to potentially have to spend $4 billion for unimpaired flows. There was a presentation by a company called Fish Bio doing extensive work in the Delta and San Joaquin. Result, predation is pervasive. There are very few fish making it through the extraordinary number of bass, striped and black bass. Unimpaired flows will not solve the issue. The greater the flows, they said, the greater the predation, nor will voluntary agreements, because there's great extraordinary predation in the tributaries. Unless they're willing to address the bass issue, the millions of bass that were planted by the state of California and stalking the fishermen, the fishing things. So it is on their study, and I encourage us to have Fish Bio come and talk to this group. But every $1 billion, when you start to invest it and throw in the interest, we get $1,000 per customer. So if we do spend $4 billion, that's $4,000 for every customer in the SFPUC system out of their pocket. If you want to talk about affordability, for absolute nonsense, the unimpaired flow issue with the State Water Resources Control Board, that is there, and there's some oncoming science that's there. Unfortunately, the State Water Resources Control Board is still on a faith-based policy making of the environmental community. Thank you.
Okay, any other comments? Seeing none, the next meeting will be I don't know where, but it'll be at the appropriate date and time as possible.
It's going to be in California, guys, okay?
In our service area. Okay, meeting stands adjourned until July 18th.